Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News. Broadcasting live from Al Arabiya headquarters, these are our top stories. A former Syrian government official responsible for the Damascus central prison is charged with torture in the United States as crowds gather in Syrian cities celebrating Victory Friday after the fall of Assad. Russia targets Ukraine's energy sites in the largest missile strike yet, causing mass blackouts for residents. Francois Bayrou is announced as the new Prime Minister of France a week after Michel Barnier's resignation. And a so-called close confidant of Prince Andrew, the brother of King Charles, has been barred from the United Kingdom after accusations of spying for China. To our top story, and the United States has charged a former Syrian official who ran one of the country's most notorious prisons with torture. Samir Osama al-Sheikh is the third person the Biden administration has charged with human rights abuses relating to the former regime of Bashar al-Assad. Thousands of Syrians were released from jail cells after their guards fled following the collapse of the former government last weekend. Nick Harper has this report from Washington.
The prisoners called this the death dormitory, a cell where dozens of them were crammed together in squalid conditions. Until a few days ago, Bassem Faz Mawat was one of the prisoners kept and tortured here. He's now returned to see what's left.
This area here, where I'm standing now, I couldn't even talk before. Here they trampled on my dignity and humiliated me. I'm a human being. Just because I am a human being, I came here today only to see that truly nothing lasts forever.
The US now wants accountability. On Thursday, it charged the head of the Damascus central prison with torture. Samir Usman al-Sheikh headed the so-called Adra prison from 2005 to 2008. He allegedly ordered the torture of prisoners and is accused of sometimes taking part himself, all aimed at snuffing out any opposition to ousted Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Al-Sheikh moved to the US in 2020 and applied for American citizenship here a few years later.
Just call me Travis.
Among the thousands of released prisoners, one American.
I was imprisoned in Damascus for the last 7 months.
Travis Timmerman was found walking barefoot through the streets, his parents and family overjoyed at the news.
Even his brothers and his sisters excited too. So
it's like the best Christmas present ever.
Yeah.
But another US citizen remains missing. Journalist Austin Tice disappeared in 2012.
Every single day, we are working to find him and to bring him home, making sure that the word is out to everyone that this is a priority for the United States.
The US's top diplomat finished up talks with his Turkish counterpart on Friday, seeking stability in Syria and fearing a resurgence of the Islamic State. The cells of the detained and tortured now only hold discarded clothes, a reminder to years of brutal oppression and a past many now want to move beyond as they try to find a future. Nick Harper, Al Arabiya News, Washington.
Russia has launched a large-scale missile attack targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure today, with explosions heard in Odessa and cities in the west of the country. It's not the first time Russian forces have struck Ukraine's power sources, resulting in blackouts for millions of residents. President Zelensky says this attack on the country's energy grid was one of the biggest yet, and he's called for more Western support for Kyiv before any kind of peace deal could be reached with Putin. Let's go live to Kyiv now and speak to our correspondent, Alex Cadier. Alex, good evening to you and thank you for joining us. This was the 12th time Russia has attacked Ukraine's power facilities. Winter is well and truly underway where you are. It's around -6 degrees Celsius. What has been the impact for those living in the areas affected?
Well, rolling blackouts across the country, that is the main impact. It's minus 12 degrees if you count the wind chill here in Kyiv, so it is very cold, and it's set to get even colder tomorrow. And we know that crews are really racing through the day and night to fix the power supply across the country. Half of the population now affected by blackouts throughout the day. They have extended the hours to which the power will be out here in Kyiv and across Ukraine. Now, we've heard stories, not during this particular blackout, but in previous times, of people stuck in lifts, for example, for up to 6 hours because the power just goes and you are stuck there until it comes back on. That is one example of the hardship that Ukrainians will face, but also how do you heat yourself? How do you power your home? How do you power your businesses when it is minus 10, minus 15 degrees outside? That will be a real concern. Something Ukrainians, unfortunately, are used to. They have gone through this last winter, and they are clearly having to go through this again. 94 missiles fired, 193 Shahed drones as well. Most of them shut down, but still, some hit their target. The IAEA saying 5 of Ukraine's 9 nuclear power stations in reduced capacity at the moment because of these strikes. Clearly, the main impact will be a lack of power and a lack of heating during these very, very cold days.
Zelensky has called for a stronger Western response to these attacks before any peace deal can even be considered. How has that gone down?
Well, certainly President Zelensky saying that this kind of attack is Vladimir Putin's kind of peace deal. Very strong response from the Ukrainian president, saying that the kind of negotiation that Putin wants to engage in is to terrorize millions of people. That was the response to this strike, asking for a strong response from its Western partners. That was echoed by Andriy Yermak, the head of the presidential office, saying that actually Ukraine needs more support from its Western allies to have better leverage in these negotiations. At the moment, there is an appetite in the West, and it has to be said, for people here in Ukraine who are exhausted by this war, to consider a ceasefire. But clearly, some of the options proposed, for example, European troops in some kind of buffer zone between Russia and Ukraine, well, Russia says they don't want that. President Zelensky clearly with less of an appetite now that the country's energy infrastructure has been damaged by Russia in this massive strike. So clearly, a lot of sticking points. We've heard that in the U.S., the envoy for the Trump administration, General Kellogg, has said that the war could be resolved in a matter of months. Clearly, there are a lot of differences here. Ukraine in a tough position on the battlefield, in a tough position when it comes to the winter and these power cuts, but certainly not wanting to give up too much in these ceasefire talks.
As you say there, Ukraine currently in a tough position. Will we see them retaliating to this latest attack, do you think?
Well, according to Russia, this was a retaliation. These nearly 200 drones and missiles targeting, or I should say more than 200 drones and missiles targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure was in response for the use of 4 US-made ATACMS missiles striking into Russian territory, hitting an oil depot, for example. So Moscow said this was a retaliation for Ukraine's use of 4 ATACMS missiles. Ukraine not particularly choosing to target energy infrastructure in Russia in retaliation, and certainly we will see a ramping up of defensive measures from Ukraine to try and avoid these issues, to try and avoid their power stations being cut and to try and avoid their population being frozen through the winter. But what is clear, and the Ukrainian armed forces have been clear about this, they will find ways to hit back against Russia in this war in general, to push back what they see as the Russian invaders. There will be some form of response. We've seen drones targeting Chechnya, for example, hitting a police station there in the last couple of days, and certainly those long-range missiles. One of the questions, we don't have clear answers about this, is that maybe these long-range missiles have stopped Russia's ability to hit in these kind of mass waves. Now, that was a question before the big attack. Clearly, Russia is still able to do so, perhaps less so. The next few days will be key to tell.
We're going to see a change in government in the US. It's not that far off. How are Ukrainians feeling about that? And Zelensky, ahead of Donald Trump coming into power?
Well, they're quite sanguine about it. They're quite realistic that they will have to find a way to work with the Trump administration. President Zelensky meeting with President Trump in Paris at the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral. That was a big diplomatic coup for the French president, saying that the only thing that Russia fears is Donald Trump and possibly China. Ukrainians I've spoken to, they say, well, at least when Donald Trump makes a decision, we know it's a decision that's being made. There won't be the kind of dithering and delay as they see it from the Biden administration. So they are very happy to work, or eager to work, with the Trump administration. However, what I will say is that the response to the claim from Donald Trump that this can be resolved in 24 hours, quite a lot of skeptical responses, to put that mildly, here in Ukraine. They do not see this as something that's resolvable very quickly, but they welcome any contribution the Trump administration can do to this war. But certainly they do not want to see their country sold off and just given up on by the United States. That remains a concern as well.
Alex Cadier in Kyiv, thank you so much for joining us this evening. The French president has appointed a new prime minister to replace Michel Barnier, who was ousted last week in a no-confidence vote. François Bayrou now faces the challenges of naming a new government and passing emergency budget legislation without a majority in Parliament. Ross Cullen reports.
Well, France has its fourth Prime Minister this year, and Emmanuel Macron, the President, will be hoping that this one sticks. His appointment of François Bayrou, the centrist leader of the Democratic Movement Party, has come after a long wait. It was the 4th of December that Michel Barnier, the outgoing Prime Minister, was deposed in that dramatic no-confidence vote inside the French lower house of Parliament that you can see behind me, the National Assembly. Emmanuel Macron will be hoping, though, that François Bayrou can survive longer than Michel Barnier, who only had about 3 months in the job. Also, there is the challenge for Mr Bayrou to appoint a government of all political forces. That's what Emmanuel Macron says he wants, a government that represents parties from across the political spectrum. But it is going to be hard for Mr Bayrou. Already on Friday, there was a reaction from the far left, who said that they will be trying to put down a no-confidence vote as soon as possible, trying to oust Mr Bayrou at the first possible opportunity. The far right did give a bit of breathing space, though. They said that they wouldn't immediately seek to remove Mr Bayrou from the job of Prime Minister. They wanted to listen in to a little bit more of his plans, get some of the details for his programme for government, wait to see who he points to his government as well. The Socialists did say that they won't be voting in favour of a no-confidence vote if Mr Bayrou refuses to use and rules out the use of executive powers. Mr Barnier, the previous Prime Minister, used executive powers, forcing the budget legislation through Parliament, and that is what sparked this whole crisis, provoking MPs to vote him out of office. Mr Bayrou is 73, the same age, incidentally, as the man he's replaced, Michel Barnier, nearly 30 years older than the President. Mr Bayrou's from the south of France, from the Pyrenees Mountains. He's the son of a farmer, and he founded the Democratic Movement Party in 2007. However, he might be a new Prime Minister, but the old challenges remain. The political landscape is the same as it was before. France has a bitterly divided Parliament, and it's going to be very difficult for Mr Bayrou to navigate a way through. Ross Cullen, Al Arabiya News, Paris.
Ross Cullen in Paris, thank you. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. South Korea's opposition leader says the best way to restore order in the country is to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol. It comes a day ahead of a planned parliamentary vote over Yoon's short-lived imposition of martial law. The president survived an initial impeachment attempt last week when his party boycotted the vote. It's reported that Luigi Mangione, the suspect charged with the fatal shooting of United executive Brian Thompson, was not a customer of the health insurer. Mangione, an Ivy League graduate, was arrested earlier this week and is currently being held at a maximum security facility in Huntington, Pennsylvania, as he awaits trial. 3 men have accused Sean Diddy Combs of plying them with drinks laced with drugs and raping them whilst they were unconscious. The separate lawsuits allege similar incidents in hotel rooms or within the music mogul's private home between 2019 and 2022. Combs, who denies all the allegations against him, is currently awaiting trial for sex trafficking and racketeering. Amazon is donating $1 million to Donald Trump's inaugural fund and will air the event on its Prime Video service. Jeff Bezos, the tech giant's founder and executive chairman, is set to meet the US president-elect next week. Trump has criticized the coverage of his first term as president by the Washington Post, which is owned by Bezos. And Jude Law has been honoured with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The British-born actor, who won a BAFTA for his role in The Talented Mr. Ripley, called the moment a delightful honour and also paid tribute to his family. A Chinese man described as a close confidant of Prince Andrew has been banned from entering the United Kingdom over national security risks. Known only as H6, the 50-year-old businessman had been invited to the prince's birthday party in 2020 to help with potential links to Chinese investments. Last year, H6 was barred from the UK by the then Home Secretary Suella Braverman and was later accused of engaging in covert and deceptive activity on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. We can now get the latest from our correspondent, John Bevir, who joins us from Bristol. John, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, tell us why the story has only just been revealed now.
Well, it's all to do with this court hearing because H6, this man that we don't know the name of, he appealed the decision to exclude him from the UK, and then that meant it triggered a court process. All of this took place in a special court set up that deals with exactly incidents like this. It is a semi-secret court, so it makes reporting some of this quite difficult. But we do have a lot of this information that has come out because of these court documents that got published. The actual documents themselves stretch to more than 50 pages, but a lot of it is very dense legal argument. But there are some truly remarkable things in there, things such as that this man is believed to be a spy working for the Chinese, that he had undue influence on Prince Andrew, and that they considered Prince Andrew fairly desperate because of the personal situation he found himself in. So there was a fear that that desperation would mean that he would be someone that the Chinese could influence. So some very damaging revelations coming out of court here in the UK.
Yes, indeed, damaging revelations. But we mentioned the man in question has been referred to as H6. What more do we know about him, his background, and why everything, especially his identity, is being kept so secret?
Yeah, there is what they call an anonymity order in force. That's basically an injunction of kinds that keeps his identity under wraps, for now at least. There is a chance that in a few weeks' time that some of these restrictions will be lifted, and we will find out more about this. In terms of his background, well, the court think that he worked for an arm of the Chinese Communist Party tasked with conducting influence operations, and that's why they were concerned about him. He was stopped as he tried to leave the country, and it was when he was stopped, he was found in possession by going through his phone and I think his laptop as well, that they found various documents describing his conversations with Prince Andrew, the kind of situation that Prince Andrew found himself in. So this is someone who it appears was known to intelligence services in the UK, but it is someone who very much was in Prince Andrew's inner circle and was a very close confidant, and that is why this all came to be, and that the then Home Secretary Suella Braverman decided that this man should be excluded from the UK on national security grounds.
This isn't the first scandal Prince Andrew has been caught up in at all. How has he responded to the story, or have any of the British family commented on this yet?
No, there's been absolute silence from all involved. Buckingham Palace, when contacted for a comment, well, they quite simply said that Prince Andrew is not a working member of the royal family, so they don't deal with his personal or legal affairs. So no comment from them. And of course, the reason that he was separated from the royal family and not taking a public role in any of the activities the royal family take part in, any of the charitable activities. He was also a trade envoy here in the UK. All of that went away because of his ties with the convicted child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, and a series of damaging revelations about just how close their friendship was, about how Prince Andrew had spent time on his island and at his houses in America, and all of that has very much damaged Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew, of course, has always said he's not done anything wrong, but he was severed in terms of his public duties from the royal family, so there's not been any response from them or Prince Andrew about this, but certainly embarrassing for all involved.
John Bevir in Bristol, thank you so much for joining us this evening. NATO Secretary-General says members of the military alliance need to spend significantly more on defence. Speaking at his first public appearance since taking the role of the NATO chief, Mark Rutte said that in order to prevent war, defence spending must increase. William Denslow has this report from Brussels.
With the war in Ukraine still raging on Europe's doorstep, Mark Rutte warns that the security outlook is the worst it's been in his lifetime. Speaking at a Carnegie Europe event in the Belgian capital, NATO's 57-year-old Secretary-General urged alliance members to respond.
We can prevent the next big war on NATO territory and preserve our way of life. This requires us all to be faster and fiercer. It is time to shift to a wartime mindset and turbocharge our defence production and defence spending.
The alliance currently calls on its 32 member countries to spend at least 2% of GDP on defence. 8 nations are currently falling shy of that figure, with others spending slightly more.
For its part, European Union officials say defence spending should increase from €10 billion to €100 billion in the next budget. And Poland says defence spending will be a priority when it takes over the European Council presidency from January.
Rutte says that NATO may be in a strong position today, but warns that won't be the case in half a decade's time, unless spending is increased.
You need to do everything you can to keep us safe. There's money on the table, and it will only increase. So dare to innovate and take risks. Come up with solutions to the swarms of drones and other new war tactics. Put in the extra shifts and new production lines.
Rutte's comments came a month before Donald Trump takes office in the US. The president-elect has threatened to leave NATO unless fellow members pay more on defence.
I don't think anybody thinks that Europe can all of a sudden go around and go 3% of GDP. They can't afford it, right? But I think NATO is politically aware enough that they need to be seen to be forcing those conversations to keep other elements, the US, on side.
Rutte warns that NATO can't afford not to spend more. During the Cold War, NATO's European nations paid over 3% of GDP on defence. NATO's chief warns that mentality is needed again. William Denslow, Al Arabiya News, Brussels.
Let's take a look at the top business news. The UK economy has shrunk for a second month in a row, falling by a further 0.1% in October. Despite analysts expecting a healthier result, the figures revealed there had been zero growth in the powerhouse services sector, with a decline in manufacturing and construction. The headquarters of Elon Musk's SpaceX will be in the city of Starbase, Texas. The tech tycoon revealed on X that he was moving the social media platform and the rocket company from California over a new gender identity law. Now turning to sports news, and Manchester City has reported record revenues today for the third year in a row, with total earnings of £715 million, and that's up from £712 million a year before. The Premier League champions' success has been credited to their match day and other commercial revenue. Australian cricketer Josh Hazlewood will return to the squad for the third test against India in Brisbane on Saturday. The country's captain, Pat Cummins, confirmed Hazlewood will replace Scott Boland. The rest of the team's lineup will remain unchanged as they look to take a 2-1 lead in the 5-test series. And tennis duo Thanos Kakanakos and Nick Kyrgios will be reunited at next month's Australian Open. Nicknamed the Special Ks when they played as juniors, the childhood best friends last won a title in 2022 in Melbourne. The pair say they are looking forward to being back on court together and, of course, entertaining all of their fans. Now, India's teen prodigy Gukesh Dommaraju has become the youngest chess world champion ever. He beat reigning champion Din Lunri from China in Singapore to claim the top spot. Ishnan Garg tells us more.
Gukesh Dommaraju has made history. He's the youngest person ever to become the chess world champion, a record previously held by Garry Kasparov. Gukesh and his competitor Ding Liren went head-to-head for 14 games at the Singapore World Chess Championship. 4 hours into the final game, Gukesh saw his opportunity. After Ding's move that many in the chess world are calling a miscalculation, Gukesh was able to break through his defenses. It was the 55th move that paved the way for Gukesh's success, after which he gave a rare grin, something chess fans had not seen often on the prodigy's face in competitions. Indian chess maestro Vishwanathan Anand, who Gukesh credits for inspiring him to become a professional player, says the 18-year-old is the future of Indian chess. Anand's arch competitor and chess icon Garry Kasparov also lauded Gukesh's victory. An unprecedented number of Indian players had qualified for this year's World Championships, and the country won 2 gold medals at the Budapest Chess Olympiad earlier this year. Kasparov had then called it the Indian earthquake in chess. Congratulating Gukesh on his victory, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi says his win has inspired millions to dream big and chase excellence. Ishan Garg, Al Arabiya News, New Delhi.
And here's a reminder of our top stories. A former Syrian government official responsible for the Damascus Central Prison is charged with torture in the United States as crowds gather in Syrian cities celebrating Victory Friday after the fall of Assad. Russia targets Ukraine's energy sites in the largest missile strike yet, causing mass blackouts for residents. François Bayrou is announced as the new Prime Minister of France a week after Michel Barnier's resignation. And a so-called close confidant of Prince Andrew, the brother of King Charles, has been barred from the United Kingdom after accusations of spying for China. And that's all from us on W News. Thanks for joining us. Riz Khan, he's coming up next. And don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. Good night.